Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you for checking out my channel. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks. Today is August 5th, 2026, and I'm going to make a video, I'm making this video on the importance of personal practices. And yeah. Welcome, thank you, I guess, for listening to me today. I have made a few videos in the past, so if you're new or relatively new to my channel, I'll scoop out some of the older videos and put the links in the description, because I have talked about, my own personal types of practices, what I do, like on a daily, weekly, monthly, kind of seasonal, different things, different kind of hygienic things that I do for myself. If you're interested in hearing those kind of things specifically, I'll put links in the description to that, because what I'm actually want to kind of tackle today isn't really like the practices so much as the importance and why we need to be doing these things. So welcome, thank you for listening to me today. First, just to say, personal practices, I mean kind of in a three-tier context. It's pretty early in my morning, just about 8 o'clock, so don't mind me. I'm a little probably have some more coffee and wake up a bit. But as I've talked about numerous times in different videos, so if you're not new, it's going to be kind of redundant, but I can't help it. It's important when we look at anything that is somewhat complex that we can use different filters, use different angles of perception and avenues of approach in order to sort of break down that which is complex into things that are more simplistic and easily talked about and understood. So I'm going to revert to my three-parted system of mind, body, and spirit, and say that there's personal practices which encompass physical body, mental body, and spiritual body. All three of them, have to be in balance with each other and in balance with your own self and where you're at. And this can change, so it's, even though you might feel really good or nail down a certain routine, so to speak, I find that it's important to remember that everything changes and flows, and all things are always seeking, or should always be seeking, kind of this harmonious balance between those three bodies, layers, whatever you want to call them. And so different practices might need different periods of time, might need different commitment and dedication at different times in your life. And maybe it's seasonally, maybe it's through a season of your life, maybe it's over a period of a whole year, or maybe it's many years. Maybe it's something that just during a certain portion of, say, the month, you need to build up one area versus another area, then later in the month the other area, build it up, and then the third area. It's not something that you have to track it and keep a track of either. It's meant to be free form. So excuse me. So all of these different kinds of things that we do to keep ourselves healthy, well, and aligned, with what we would like to do in order to serve, those types of practices are really, really important, because if we don't pay attention to all of the layers. And meaning to say as well, like if we're going to take a systematic look at things, when we think about practices that you do for yourself, sometimes certain practices even, they encompass, all three, mind, body, and spirit, all together. Say something like meditation, it has a physical quality to the practice. People might think it's just sitting, but if you've never sat for an extended period of time, then your body's going to start speaking to you immediately. There's a physical component that comes with actually learning to sit down and not move and sit in stillness. That can be very at the forefront of it, feeling completely physical. And sometimes even that physical body can just speak louder than the mental or the spirit, and you can't even get into the mental practice of calming thoughts, or you can't even get into the spiritual connection of meditation to lock into God, because those front layers are so loud. But and this is what I mean. Sometimes we have different areas of practice that need to be honed and toned before another one can be addressed or even connected to. So bearing that kind of thing in mind, there's loads of different practices, and in my opinion, once you start to look at all the different things you do for yourself as self-care, you can start to integrate those other, the triad, I like to look at it as. So say something as simplistic as brushing teeth, and I've talked about this different times. This is something that is a personal physical hygienic process that we do to keep our mouth biome healthy, right? And I'm not going to get into bad toothpaste or fluoride poison or anything like that, but please look into that stuff for yourself. It can seem like just a flat physical, just the body is involved in doing that, and it's caring just for the physical body. But when you start to actually integrate those other layers of self with yourself, it's kind of redundant, but you'll see and notice there's, after while doing the physical cleaning of the mouth, what's going on with your thoughts? What are you thinking about while that's taking place? That becomes another layer to the personal practice, to where you can learn to bring in better thoughts while you're brushing your teeth. You can really either concentrate your attention and energy on like what you're doing and bring more life into the sensations, or you can back out of the sensations of what you're physically doing, kind of zone out while you're doing it, and bring in calming thoughts, bring in that kind of meditation type of practice in the mental space into this brushing of the teeth. And also you can bring in the spirit layer into that and really connect with yourself, with God and your source, in doing good service for the whole while you're brushing your teeth. So while one practice might seem like it dominates a certain area, there's certainly chances for integration whenever we want it to be. And bringing in deeper integration and helping these avenues kind of balance each other with whatever work you're doing, to me is a real great sort of student alchemy, live action kind of practice, Now, meaning to say that with all of these different practices as well, we have this chance to look at it systematically. So not just what is the body and the function and where and how what's happening, but what is the design behind it, and what is it interacting with systematically? As in, we have external happenings, we have internal happenings, and we have this sort of intermediate flow that happens between the two. So, we can bring in this kind of secondary triad into remembering that what we're doing as we brush our teeth is actually a service to the whole. Like I just mentioned with connecting to that spirit layer. The spirit layer reminds us of our extended influence in this kind of third party space that is the reality space. And that incorporates in our external torrido, and by incorporating service, now it's your choice. Again, if you're negatively aligned, your service is to self, and you're going to see it as just a service to yourself, and sort of be gaining those points, so that energetic points for self only, and trying to keep them within your own torrido. That creates an external torrido which draws in and thinks only about the self. It doesn't offer out. It's not giving service to whole all the time. However, you could see it as an offering to service to the whole, because by putting your best foot forward, by keeping yourself healthy, by offering your mouth the best environment it can, you are serving self, yes. But if you see self as a reflection of the whole, as any other self, if you could say, well, I would encourage my best friend to brush their teeth just as happily as I am right now. I would tell my children, my coworker, whoever, somebody, that they should do this service as well, that this service actually does impact the whole collectively, because it's through action, teaching, showing, and contractually sealing this promise of good work for all, of encouragement of good work for all, and for that connectivity of the all in all work that you're doing. And this line of intention is literally what draws the line between systematic thinking. It sets, the tone and the laws of how you operate through the world, through your days. So being mindful again about what you're doing, and you can offer good service to the internal into the internal core vortex, while offering out service to the whole and the external torrido. They're meant to balance each other. You're meant to be doing these things at the same time. Serving yourself is serving the whole. There's really no separation, unless we choose to want to have a separation there. That rewrites the rules to the system, changes and flips the pole flip in your own torrido, and you serve self only, because we have the free choice to do that. This is a separated simulation, and its focus is, on systems, on separate operations, and how those operations interact with each other. And we always have the choice to invert and change things negatively and focus solely on yourself system, or into some other system, just segregated service into a club or a business or a group, or some kind of industry thing, like churches and all that kind of stuff. You can segregate your service to that and just give your service to that thing, and it will exclude the whole. I don't recommend operating in that kind of way, because it creates unnecessary imbalances. But we are free will here, creator consciousness evolving itself, and there's always that choice. So being mindful of the type of service you're offering during all times is crucial. This kind of mindful operation of self is what I mean by personal practices and the importance of them. All life actually becomes kind of takes over these personal practices, and it helps them to extend out, to always kind of be taking place and happening. Again, if we can see it that way and allow it for that perspective. Now, I'm bringing this kind of thing up today mostly to speak about the external world a bit, and why and how, doing these good services for self, operating and seeking to operate from a positive alignment for yourself, so out of unconditional love, honoring your own sovereignty, giving yourself freedom of exchange in all directions, opening up your sights so that you can see 360 degrees around you in a full light, instead of segregating your light attention into this kind of categorized beam where you're seeking what you expect to find. these are really false loops that so many of us get trapped in all the time. That really, whenever we find ourselves in these kind of ways, we should trail back and think about system alignment and find the corrections for ourselves. It's not to say that those things will never come up, or that you never should find them, or you'll get to a certain point of practice maintenance where they just never come up. That's not going to happen. And when we have a false goal set like that in front of us, all we end up doing is exhausting ourselves, thinking we're ever going to get to that, and then depleting the good work we could ever do for ourselves because of the shame, worry, all of these other negative emotions that will come with not being able to meet that goal the way that we think, the way it's shown it's supposed to be met. And said, let's just wipe the board with that. That's not real. It's not a real goal. Get used to the escalator, get used to the treadmill, get used to at every minute it getting a little further away. The horizon is never crossed. The real world teaches us many, many truths right in front of our faces all the time, that if we would just choose to accept and incorporate them into great lessons, that is what truth is, we would do much better work for ourselves. So horizon is beautiful. It's not to say we don't need to, we're not moving towards something. Of course we are. However, it's not to be met and stopped at. If and when we meet points of arrival, there's a divine sense of infinite intelligence that meets us at those arrivals, that pulls the veil, that crosses the threshold with us, that pulls us across, that is something otherworldly. It's bigger than humanity. It's much bigger than the container and the single mind, fractalized consciousness of creator source that we are. It takes the whole creator to do that kind of work, or to be met at those kind of places. And so I would never try to explain them. I would never try to pinpoint them, or say there's an instructions way to get there, because it's not. It's something that we do not do as self, as an individualized self. So having this kind of uncontrollable understanding, call it faith if you like that kind of word, or belief, or whatever, but it's something that you either get or you don't. And it's if you have to ask, you'll never know, because the asking and the need for confirmation in an unexpected way, it causes a dissonant ripple effect that just tells that source, tells God that you're not ready for it yet, and that you don't really want it. You want your answer about what you think is going to happen at that horizon, or what you think will be met after that threshold, what the next step will look like. And it just doesn't work that way. Okay, and so yeah, back to kind of practices and importance. What is and has been taking place in the long run, long perspective view of society and the sort of reality world that we're a part of, looking at the negative alignment and just understanding where negative segregation and negative service takes one. It is... Oh, my TV's going to turn off. Sorry. Let me just mute this. I don't want to have random commercials yelling in the background. Negative service cannot evolve and grow into newness. And what happens is, if you cannot incorporate new into anything, it ends up wilting, not growing and blooming, Or, I mean, it might grow and bloom, but it's not perennial. I mean, it is perennial. It's not this kind of thing that's going to keep taking place. It's not going to come back again next season, because it's set with an ending. This is the issue with negative alignment in the first place. I mean, well, the first issue is that they, don't listen to truth. They don't align with God. So it's like, first and foremost, we take out source, we take out God, we take out the whole infinite cycle. And when we take out the whole infinite cycle, we get into the first problem, which is that now things are not cyclic, or seemingly we have one and done. We have birth and expiration, and new birth is completely separate from this prior birthing. And this locked in separation, instead of allowing a circle and cyclic to be seen and known and really leaned into and felt, well, it becomes linear, and it becomes point A to point B and done, and A to B and done, and A to B and done. And that solidifies and cements in their fear, worry, and control mechanisms of negative alignment, to then propose that everything has to have this clear-cut beginning and end, and that and everything starts to have to follow this model from the largest to the smallest. So not only is it every life is born and dead, but that each dream, each goal, each invention, every idea, has to have a clear-cut beginning and an end. And it has a very separate approach and interaction with it that also has a clear-cut incorporation and disincorporation from. And this is again why, the laws, the rules of negative systems become laws to those who choose to inhabit that space, because it seems like it proves itself. It seems like it's unquestionable, and it seems like, well, that's just the way it is. And it's like, well, when you look at a bicycle wheel, so, and you have a full view of the bicycle wheel, but you choose to pinpoint one spoke on that wheel, color it, spray paint it like neon green, and then just focus on that one spoke, you're going to see the linear straight line, a segregated portion, and that it has a clear-cut beginning and an end. It comes, from either, depending on, where it is, it either comes from, the very center and goes out to the end, or maybe you have a whole spoke that goes from one end of the circle to the other. But, it's a straight line, and it has a beginning and an end. There's no arguing with any person who wants to just focus on that one spoke and look at it and say, well, this spoke is just there and there. It starts and it ends, and it's very obvious, and it cuts straight across this. You want to talk about the circle, you want to talk about it going around and around. Well, this spoke doesn't go around and around. This spoke is not a circle, it's a straight line, and it goes from here to here. And they just want to look at that and just focus on that. How can you argue with a person about the shape of a wheel when their whole focus and their attention is designated on the spoke? There's truth to the spoke. The spoke is there. It's part of the wheel. There's no kind of arguing with it, and they will zoom their perspective in even more and just focus on, like, what's the point? You have to have spokes in order for the wheel to work. The spoke is more important than the wheel. They will have all of these justifications and all of these seemingly confirmations as to why their focus is on the spoke and what's real about the spoke. And they just completely ignore the fact that it's one of many, and that it's part of a wheel, and that the wheel goes around and around and around, and it takes the bicycle somewhere. They don't talk about that. They're going to look at just the spoke and say, well, the spoke's not going around and around. I see the spoke is stationary. It's not moving. but they lack the depth and density of dimensional thinking, as in to even understand that a spoke could spin this way. They're looking for rotational spinning of the spoke. The spoke stays stationary in its spot. It doesn't move. And so they will solidify more on their lies, hop on the back of that, and plant on more things in order to help convince anybody who wants to have who wants to talk about the wheel, who wants to talk about anything else, that no, this is it. This is where our focus is at. This is the truth of that. We can watch it over and over again. And yeah, so it's hard to argue or debate with those who are set in a negative focus, because they're choosing that focus. They're choosing what the orientation is and where, they're determining what's happening at. And you can't really argue with those types. Why did I get off on this tangent? Meaning to say, I guess, that the world in itself is focused on the spoke and is really telling us all that that's what matters, that's what we are, focus on that. And that's all that matters. But truly, we are on a bicycle going somewhere, and what we should really do is probably pay attention to actually where the wheels are going and taking us. And, in context to personal practices and to operating well, the world, can keep us only caged and can keep us only focused on their problems and their solutions and their explanations if we stay in the zoomed in perspective of negative service. As soon as we step out into positive service, as soon as we step back and remember the whole, it becomes really obvious what's more important and how, incorrect their perspective really is. Now, hopefully, the more that we do personal practices, this is why personal hygienic practices are so important, because it's that active practice of stepping away from the spoke, away from the whole world that's really hyper-vigilantly focused on these physical things, on that, and stepping back and remembering the whole in all of these different ways. That's what personal practices, spiritual connection, helps us to do and to remember and to recall. And the more that we do that continuously with ourselves, the less we feel jammed into their perspective or have to bend over and look into what they're looking at, because we'll say, it doesn't matter. It's not worth my time to do that. I'm going on a wonderful bike ride, and I'm going to see beautiful scenery around me, and I'm going to feel the wind in my hair and make it to the beach. I don't care about what little micromanagement moments are happening on the spoke. In fact, the spoke's work is already set, and it does its work naturally. It doesn't even need your hypervigilant micromanaging moments down there. It's unnecessary, and this is the way that look at a lot of things that take place with negative alignments and just say it's completely unnecessary. It doesn't serve a whole, and in fact it distracts from service of the whole. And if you watch that spoke while you're trying to ride your bike, well, you're going to crash. You're going to either hurt yourself or someone else. So meaning to say that the world really encourages us to do that, and I am hoping to, I personally hope that anytime I find myself staring at that stupid little spoke, that I could, step back. Now, to kind of jump off the metaphor and the bike and say that the best way that anyone who cares about making a change in the world, it doesn't matter what change and where in the world that you think you want to make it, the first primary place and the only place that you should really look to actually have authority over the changes is your inner world. And through good practice with self, you will see ripple effects out in the external world that shift and change and alter things that you seemingly didn't have anything to do with. This is another thing about the beauty of the spirit layer and the third party reality space we're all a part of, this sort of grid, the netting, the ether that interlinks us all, the sort of medium that we are all a part of moving through, is that messages, information, energy is sent and translated and communicated in ways that we, don't really notice. And we don't need to notice, just like you don't need to know and notice all of the movements of the chain and the pedals and the brakes and stuff while you're riding the bike. You ride the bike and you pay attention to what's going on around you. You brake when you need to. You pedal faster or harder when it comes up, or you pedal easier downhill, or whatever the case is. But the movements don't change, and you don't need to watch the chain or watch how the brakes are working in order to know that when you do them, they happen. So working through our personal practices is like that. We don't need to worry about what the repercussions are going to be or how they will affect another, because they are already happening and doing that. And if it's coming from a heart-centered, honest place of good service for the whole, well, honest, good things are happening to the whole and for the whole and within the whole. And so we're already doing it, by doing it. And this other thing is to have a backbone and a strength and a structure and positive alignment tells us we don't need to seek retribution. Our frenetic brain, our manager here in operations, it doesn't care about future retribution. It doesn't worry about what's going to come in later, because inward pulling of a balanced toroidal, it does this naturally, and it does it continuously, without monitoring, so to speak, about what's taking place. Think about the way that a tree or any plant, soaks up nutrients and water from the soil and ground around it. It doesn't dig a well. It is the well. It's already dug into the ground, and water porously seeps through as it rains. It's stored in underground aquifers. It naturally, the soil, the earth, the water takes care of when it comes and when it's there. It's always abundant. And the tree roots are met with the water and just bring it in as it finds the water, as it needs it. It's not ordering a gallon of water from some kind of shopping app when it needs water and waiting for it like thirsty. It's going to die if the water doesn't come. These things don't even go through a plant's processing. They just know that it's readily available continuously, and to draw it through the roots as it's needed. The roots' work is to seek out those things. And our toroidal has a root process to it. It's heavily rooted. It's not called a root chakra for no reason, And so we don't need to worry about retribution. We don't need to worry about where your service is going or how it might impact another or not or whatever. It's out there, and the other who needs to be impacted for it, its roots are drawing an impact. Its roots are calling forth help. Its roots are looking for water. And so you just shaking it out and offering it out is like the rain over there falling. It happens naturally, and it gets to who needs it at the right time. So we, like I mentioned before, the laws and rules of positive service, they don't focus on incoming retribution. The main focus and drive of an external toroidal, is this push of service, is a calling upwards of things to do, of something to give, an offering, an idea, a creative skill. That's where the focus is at a properly balanced external toroidal, and it rests on this firm inner core, which is abundant in its knowing of itself. And so the external torrido isn't worried about lack or resources or how it will get what it needs to do to get the things done it wants to do, because a whole other operating system, the inner vortex core, handles all of that stuff already. And if you're well balanced, then it's continuously singing a song of surplus and abundance out, continuously and effortlessly offering this eternal vibration of having exactly what is needed to be done at the moment. And that is like a buoy that keeps everything afloat. And when you're always afloat, then yeah, I could do this. Of course I could do that. We'll get it to happen. We'll make it work. Becomes the sort of underlying truth that your inner core is speaking to the external torrido. And if you operate like that, then there's no problems. And the inner core speaks with the external torrido in such an integrated way, just like the roots speak with the inner operations of the tree system, because they're one and the same. And so what the roots feel called to look for, what the external torrido draws into itself, the inner core already has a plan for. The inner core has already asked for that in the way that it asks for things, which doesn't affect the outside world, and which is not contingent on anything from the outside world, because internal torrido is not a system that is exposed to the outside world, the external world. The inner world, which is before and more important and actually more real than the external world, is what the external world is built off of. And they're separate. There's this kind of impasse that they don't. Just like we can't just jump into heaven, just like you can't jump out of body. I decide I'm done with it. I'm done with this game. Tonight I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to before and after. I'm done with here and now. We don't have that. This is the same thing about you'll never meet the horizon. It's this faith and trust and believe in a greater benevolent source mind of God that knows when time is done, that knows when your job is over, that knows when that horizon will be met. And when that thing happens, when that thing approaches, when the end of life comes, God takes you. And it's not something we choose to do by self. It's not something that human mind does. Fractionated consciousness, individualized consciousness cannot make that step. There's an impasse. These are two different worlds of operation. This is the same reason truth speaks to me, that we don't just hop in a rocket and fly away to another world and that we're not just going to get into some other universe. It doesn't work in that way. Different worlds, realities, are compressed and contained by higher divine mind, which, that's like an ant's mind thinking that it can just decide one day that it's going to grow to be an elephant and just keep on growing and turn into elephant size, and then all of a sudden be a part of that larger world. There's an isness, there's sacred boundary set and a purpose for function, so you cannot just change function and all of a sudden change purpose. So inner world is not and does not interact with external world, and external world is built off of inner world, and so inner world leads the way as to what's allowed to be built and experienced, seen, and interacted within the external world. Can have it without the inner world. It's not that we couldn't have it's not the other way around. This is not just the world's here forever and the internal world meets the external world. But anyways, this is again why I'm saying that in our processes, that having our personal practices is the most core important thing that we could be doing at this pivotal time in the world, because the inner world ripples out to the external. And if we ever want to see changes in external, we have to change internal first. And I'll say finally, kind of the crutch and the reason that I wanted to really offer this out right now is because there's a lot of impressing, impeding, and infringing happenings in the external world that are trying to rewrite the truths of the internal world. And a majority wants to rewrite the way that we think we experience these worlds. It is potential that we can see a pole flipping happening with the external world. I don't think that will happen because, like I've said before, the internal world has to initiate the pole flip, and I'm under the impression and belief that the internal world of the whole world sits in God's mind, and therefore God, source creator, would need to initiate a type of flip like that. And the fact of the matter is that God is an abundant organic system. It's one template. There's no change in that, and so there's no capacity for poles in that manner. And again, that really sort of solidifies the expressional happenings, because the inner vortex, inner core world is guided by the spirit layer, and this, intangible kind of happenings. How would the negative world actually cause a reverberation to that type of place when it came before it? It doesn't make any sense. So I do not think that we will see complete corruption in the external world at any time. I think there will always be corrective balance forces coming in from the inner God's mind, reverberating out to help alleviate and balance out those tipping points that seem to be approaching. And the more and more of us that give that trust to God and faith to benevolent source creator, that those control mechanisms do happen and will happen, the more readily we call towards that. And I do think that the calling is heard by God. And I think the calling for balance, the harmonious symphony we all could sing together, when that is heard, timing is right and God's help comes. And when that is tuned or whatever, that's when those horizons are met. So as individual pieces, all we can do is harmonize. All we can do is work to offer that good call and be of good service. And just by doing that, we encourage others around us to do it as well, and yet we harmonize with those who are also just doing it independently, who don't even need the call to do it, and that strengthens the overall whole positive, energetic frequency, like tuning fork sound, So even if, especially if around you seems like no impact, around you seems like doesn't matter, it's dark and it's inverted and there's lots of negativity, this is when it's even more crucial that we remember that we are not alone in positive processes, that we are not alone in unconditional love and respect and sovereignty and offering out good work and being, living alive, being the living love that we really should be and are, designed to be. Because it's when there's not a clear-cut example in front of you in the external world, that generally means that you're kind of a cornerstone and that you're a pivotal marker in the whole collective. There's a lot of pivotal markers in the whole collective. We're never alone, and in fact I think there's sort of out of time stationary markers as well. Call them whatever you'd like to call them, angels or a God, or but that their purpose, role, and function is to sort of be like this transmitter that is always singing out a harmony, always having that melody, singing the chorus, or and allowing us to keep tuning ourselves, allowing us to sing along with them, allowing us to know that we're not alone in the way that we are processing. And that those pivotal marker points all work in conjunction with each other. And if you are like that, and if you are feeling that kind of lone role, when you do your personal practices, that feeling of connectivity that you get, that is your retribution, that's your payment, that is your nourishment, your water that your roots are seeking. So really soak it up and know that it's coming from real places, and it's more real than anything here in this world, and it's more real than trying to see circumstances change. It's more real than money and trying to be paid for something. It's more real than having influence and others come to you for your advice or seeking that your help or something, your healing or your energy for some kind of reason. These times and these places are dark, but it doesn't mean that there's not work to be done, and it actually is more important that we do this work in these darker times. So sometimes it feels like in dark times when we're alone, they don't matter as much, and this is us being called into staring at the spoke again and forgetting about the whole wheel and forgetting about the bike ride. And this is as much to myself as to others out there, because I can feel the more pressing call to like focus in on something, or depletion, or kind of stagnation. To me, I always kind of see a silver lining on there, that it's like, oh wow, actually I have a great chance to recall that interlinking net of communication, of love, that is more real than this darkened world. And now I've actually had a threshold point with myself here where I can recognize that world, and in that recognition, the power to choose out of it again. And when we do that choice of stepping out of it again, that relinquishing of lies, that relinquishing of the darkness, of saying I don't need that for anything. I am eternal. I am a surplus of abundant love and energy and vitality from creator source. I don't have to be hyper focused on anything. That's sometimes even we don't realize the explosion of sparks and great light that work does. Sometimes it's even more powerful, and it creates more of a brightening and a lightening in the darkened space than if we just stand there and we're never met with these moments that have us question ourselves, and standing in the light and holding the truth and love. Those kind of fumbles, those mistakes, those moments of correction, even for those of us who have a strong practice all of the time, those faltered moments, they're not darker, they're not weaker, they're not moments where darkness comes over you and you're giving into the dark. In fact, that pulling back and that notion, like I said, is a great spark. It's a great motion. It's a great notion throughout the collective of how to remember, and that teaching in itself can be, it can be like a truth bell ringing through all of class, like break time. And you never know who else is out there in another kind of classroom, like struggling through a study period or at the end of a test and just wants it to be over or something. And the bell ring that you cause by doing your own hard work and your own good work for self, it alleviates those minds out there that you don't ever even see or know, who are over in another classroom, but they hear the bell ring and they say, oh yeah, I'm done too. Rest, step back for a moment. And you might never even get that sight of understanding that work. However, if we can remember that that's actually taking place in the work, it refuels us even more. It really does. Because if you are trying and seeking and aligning with positive service that is fueled by holistic service, because to remember you're not alone, to remember your service is not segregated to self, that service is about the whole, that is what lights the whole Torito. That is what really fuels eternal life. You can't find it in a segregated system if you're fueling for self. If you're just trying to bump up your own kind of ego or your own shadow or your own negative service, then service laws will tell you have to go into that other classroom, or you have to create a monitor or some kind of camera surveillance into all classrooms to then see the relief, see the exchanges, see the others having that, and draw their power from them in order to fuel your system specifically. And I mean, who we don't want to live like that. Many of us are living like that, and it's very incorrect. When we honor truth and abundant surplus, we're not looking for retribution. We're not looking for oversighted management and checking off boxes that things have been met and in the way we expect them to be. And instead, we remember the truth of the heart, and that tells us that we don't need to see, that it just is happening. And just in the faith of the knowing that it is happening without seeing the happening, that is what feeds the real system. That is where abundant surplus really comes from. And you can't deplete that. That's always there for you to tap into. It's always there for you to believe in and to know is happening. Because it doesn't require external confirmation. You see where the switch and the change in the systems is? Understanding what is true payment and what is false payment. Forcing us into debt slavery, forcing you into this kind of pay-to-play, dragon hoarding of treasure and thinking that, you have to become this kind of rich mogul of some sort of way that's never going to pay. It's never paying in the same limitless way that positive systems really pay us in, exchanges really happen in. There's a real true bank account that's just limitless. If you tap into it, it's a whole different currency. But here they have a limited currency, a fiat currency that they want everybody to play with instead. And, if you choose to play by their laws, then you're going to be in a rat race for your whole life, trying to save and play and do all the kind of things that they get hyper-focused on. But at the end of the day, none of that money saves your soul. None of that money extends your life. None of that money is bringing God towards you. But if that's, their systems aren't focused on any of that. Their systems cut God out. They don't care. We'll deal with him later. Whenever he calls us, then we'll deal with whatever he has to say, or we'll run from him as long and far as we can. And worst case scenarios, they're like, F that guy. We don't even care what he has to say. We're doing here and now. And he's not a part of here and now. He's out there. And that's what the laws say. Here and now is not before and after, so this guy don't matter right now. This is, I hope to not model my systems or practices in that kind of segregatory, self-serving manner. I don't want to dilute myself and turn into these delusional chasings of the tail where I think I'm feeding my own system and keeping myself going. I want to feed a whole system, keep the whole going, and be interacting with the whole, and then return to the whole when it's done with singular service. I have a whole to return to. I'm not this body, I'm not this one life. It's much different and much larger than that. And when we can lean into that and know that for sure, it changes perspective on operations. It changes your whole perspective on what the third-party reality space is all about. It changes your perspective about yourself, your neighbors, your family, strangers. It even changes your perspective on the devil, on evil, on people who think they're bad, on all of those poor souls trapped in negative alignments. We're able to see it as a spoke on a wheel, and it doesn't impact the way the bicycle rides, So anyways, I've talked for way too long. I thought I was going to be short this morning, and now almost an hour. So thank you if you sat with me through this kind of whole personal talk and explanation behind why I feel personal processes, practices are crucial, and also why they're sort of the foundation and the only place from which we can make an impact in the world, and the only place in which we should even be looking to. In fact, so thanks for listening. Thanks for your time and energy. Thank you for your contribution to our collective and your service. We certainly wouldn't be the same without you. Thank you for watching mine, and I'll see you next time.